At the end of March of 1953, the Australians were sent out towards the southern tip of South America to initialize an invasion to recapture the continent. The absence of Palpatine's troops in the lower half meant that the Australian infantry were able to capture a dockyard in a matter of days and would spread like wildfire. They were ordered to head out in several divisions to capture and claim as much territory as they could, maybe even capturing more docks or establish usable airports. This was easier said than done. They hoped reinforcements would arrive quickly with the dockyard in the south in their hands, but it would take time to move that many soldiers over towards South America, and as a month had passed, barely any reinforcements had arrived. To make matters worse, the first of Palpatine's armies were on their doorstep. Things in Japan fared a bit better. The amount of resistance was laughable compared to what they had stacked up in the Americas. It would be a matter of a few more months before this last part in Asia would be in earthly hands once more. Saudi Arabia by now had also been recaptured, chopped up, and divided amongst several puppet governments that had adapted the communist way of thinking. According to intel, the amount of units under Palpatine's command was so little that this was the time to attack, as reinforcements from space could be underway, and at this moment there were less than 1.7 million units spread out around America. The Soviets unleashed attacks in the northern parts of South America, most notably to help the Australians and heeding the intel warning, but also to cover up the fact that Stalin had died weeks prior to this. The death of the dictator gave way to a sudden need to assign a successor. This also explained the reason why the Soviets demanded a different nation, Australia in this case, to lead the invasion attempt instead of themselves. Nikita Khrushchev would follow in Stalin's footsteps, and he had set his gaze towards America like a hawk. He said that the Comintern ruled so much of the earth already that they had to take back America at all costs and erect a communist government in their name. By October of 1953, India had sent in their men as well to aid the Russians in the assault up north, but they were already being pushed back towards the shore. Another attempt seemingly doomed to fail. More Australians were at the ready in northern Africa to be sent over to any docks that the Russians or Indians would capture. But it would seem that they would not make the crossing in time if things kept going the way they were now. With Australia's gaze concentrated towards America, Stalin's last plan before he died came to fruition. The Australian politicians, assigned by the Soviet Union themselves, had used the opportunity of the absence on a look inward to hard turn the government towards that of communism. Riots soon erupted, but were put down partly by sent-in Russian forces. Up north, the Comintern forces tried once more to use Florida as an anchor point to unleash a full invasion there, but with the bulk of Palpatine's army stationed here, it was simply too difficult to manage with just a small invasion army. In the northern part of South America, the Russians that were exhausted were replaced by the Turks and South Africans, who would move both west and south to hopefully be more successful. The Russian soldiers in Florida were trapped, as now stormtroopers attacked from their rear angle and closed in on them via pincer attack strategy. It would end in a bloodbath. The invasions everywhere ended in total failure. It was the most foothold the armies of Earth had in America since the longest time, and though it sparked some hope, the defeat felt harder than ever. By 1956, things still hadn't changed. Petty attempts by multiple nations still happened every now and then, but what many feared had come true. Palpatine had indeed been reinforced by a new fleet that had appeared above Earth. Their manpower had more than doubled, though the armies of Earth combined still had a strength that was almost 10 times theirs. Halfway through 1958, still no invasion attempt had reached any more success than previously. This made it clear to nation leaders that the next big invasion would need to be on a larger scale with more preparation. The downside was that Palpatine in turn had more time to prepare or defend if he so chooses. The higher-ups in the Soviet Union agreed that a full-scale invasion including not thousands but millions of soldiers would be unleashed in 1960 at the dawn of a new era. The war with Palpatine had now been going on for over 20 years, and things had drastically changed on Earth. Besides new technological breakthroughs, the world's overall governments and ideology got plunged into darkness. The almighty Comintern stood opposite of the galactic invader. Many had envisioned that the attack of an extraterrestrial force would bind the humans of Earth under one banner, and that this banner would represent freedom and what it means to be a citizen of Earth. But instead, fate would have it that the banner they were under felt more like shackles, part of a totalitarian regime controlled by a single man. More and more reinforcements were pouring into the Americas. With Palpatine showing no signs of any attempt to invade any other continent, it became clear that it would be an almost impossible feat to take back their home with close to 5 million enemies spread throughout. Nevertheless, the Comintern and people of Earth waited. Their combined strength would hit the American shores like a sledgehammer, opening a path towards vengeance, redemption, and in some people's eyes, liberty. Palpatine was aware that an attack was imminent. Though he was of the opinion that he could hold the taken lands, it would seem likely that the initial battles would not go in his favor. He requested more reinforcements, which he received soon after. Then in the first week of 1960, the dawn of the 60s, which hopefully would prove more resilience and victories for the people of Earth, the large-scale invasion was unleashed. Across the entire East Coast, whole fleets led out armies that attacked the beaches under the cover of immense bombing campaigns. Some of the soldiers were flown over and would be dropped via parachute to establish more land in their name from the get-go. Initially, the invasion was a devastating success, with the combined armies of Earth being able to capture multiple cities, airports, and dockyards. In South America, Turkey attacked, though they were not as strong or that great in number, meaning they would act more as a distraction to avoid the legions in South America from heading north to reinforce. Recapturing cities like Washington and New York were huge morale boosters, and the Comintern governments demanded that artillery and fortifications be set up all over the city's perimeter. One particular aspect that worked in the humans of Earth's favor was that Palpatine in the past years had erected many bunkers and fortifications himself. Those that were not destroyed during the bombing campaigns were then reused by the armies of Earth, saving them time and effort in fortifying taken places. The waters were bustling with life as many more fleets from different nations headed on over to do their part and partake in the battle. The events were closely followed on television and radios all over, and everyone was convinced they would win. The communist states would be led under the government of Earl Browder, handpicked by Khrushchev himself to handle things in America once the dust had settled. But aerial photos showcased what hell lay in wait for the soldiers from so many different countries who were now residing in America. Millions of stormtroopers, clones, droids, and other enslaved alien species descended down on the armies of Earth to crush them and send them back to the abyss of the ocean. The Turkish Empire was already facing massive trouble due to being undermanned and poorly equipped. Only a handful of galactic imperial resistance was enough to break their armies in half. But despite the troubled vision at the horizon, intel suggested that the humans of Earth were on the winning side. Claiming important land pieces and achieving victories on the battlefield made their position known and sturdier as more reinforcements arrived from the continents to the east. But by February, only a month after the invasion was initialized, the first setbacks could be felt as Palpatine summoned every unit from every corner of the land to fight the armies of Earth. At multiple locations, entire armies were wiped out, pushing back the front and creating holes that would waver morale and the all-out possibility to advance west. From the north, casualties and major losses were reported as well. The front line here was not as spread out, and defeat came down harder as the men had to fall back further than elsewhere. It seemed that the tide had turned and that another invasion attempt would end in failure. Was there nothing that the people of Earth could do? Many were afraid that they would be stuck in this limbo forever.